This thing's heavy. Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to show you how to unbox, set up, and start using a Troy-Bilt 2410 snowblower. Let's get started. Unboxing is pretty simple. You start by just cutting along this dotted line along the bottom edge of the carton. Make sure you cut all the way around all four sides. Now this can be a little bit tricky at the corners. And once you've cut through all the sides, you should be able to just lift the top right off. Kind of like that. One thing to be aware of is that the side and top are not attached, so those might flop around on you just a little bit. Also note that the discharge chute is just sitting loose on top. Attached to the gas cap, you should have a little packet like this with the paperwork in it that includes your owner's manual, registration guide, those sorts of things. These should be put somewhere safe, though I don't know how useful it's going to be for this particular machine. Various areas of the snowblower are covered in this protective plastic. You can go ahead and just peel this right off. So on both sides of the handle, you'll have these bolts with 1/2-inch nuts on them. Get the nuts a little bit loosened, and then you should be able to just pull those nuts off by hand. You'll need to completely remove one of the bolts and its corresponding nut. The other one, you just need to loosen up a little bit so it's easy to rotate the handle, but you can leave the nut on there. With everything loosened up, you can then rotate the handle up into place and replace the bolts that you just pulled out. Make sure when you're tightening down that this head stays completely seated in the square hole in there. If that pops out like this, then the bolt will just tend to spin. One thing to mention when you're tightening up this nut is to make sure that this bracket is rotated so that this rod goes down to the chute control where it belongs. Otherwise, you'll have some weirdness with your angles. Up next is the chute assembly, and the chute, as you can see, has these little fingers or arms here that are all pushed towards the inside. You want to bend them and pull them so that they are around the outside instead of on the inside, like that. Then next you fit the chute onto the output hole and push those tabs around and lock them into place. With all three locked in place, the chute is now secure and won't come off. Next, pull this little plastic cover off the end of the screw. Then remove the cotter pin that's in the end of that, and also pull off this little washer. Next, we're going to insert the rod for the control of the chute right through there. Put the washer on first, and then install the cotter pin. And now your chute will rotate. If you haven't already done so, now is a great time to take it off the pallet. Next, we're going to set the height of these skid shoes, and I've got a little trick that I like to use to make sure that that shave plate inside there is set just right. So the trick I like to use to set the height of the shave plate down here is to grab 2 quarters. Here in the US, 2 quarters are just the right height when they're stacked together for the gap there under your shave plate. Put one at one end and one little stack at the other end. With those quarters in place, you can loosen these just a little bit until you feel the shave plate drop down and sit on the top of those quarters. I'm going to leave this side loose and go do the other side so it's even. Again, you don't have to take these completely off, just loosen them until this drops down onto your quarters. Once that shave plate is resting on the quarters, go ahead and tighten these back up. And of course, tighten up the other side as well. So now with our height set, we can lift up a little bit and slide our quarters back out. And we'll have exactly the right gap on our shave plate. Next, we're going to check our tire pressures. On the sidewall here, it says these can go up to 22 pounds as a maximum pressure, though you don't really want to use them that way in snow. You want them underinflated a little bit, and they will come a little overinflated from the factory to prevent flat spots developing during shipping. Checking here, we can see they are pretty much at about their maximum. Maybe they're just a hair over. We're going to go ahead and let a little bit out. I like to set mine to around 10 pounds. There we go. If you find you have too little traction, maybe your tires are a little overinflated. Next, before we start it for the first time, we need to check the oil. Now mine arrived with oil already in the engine, but yours may have come with a small container of oil that you need to pour into here first. We'll use this dipstick that's on the end of the oil filler cap. Notice how there's two holes here at the very end. What you want to do is pull the dipstick out, wipe it off with a towel, put it back in and completely close and lock it. Then unlock it and pull it right back out and look to see how high up that oil comes on the dipstick. In my case, it is right at even with that top hole, which is exactly where you want it. Next, it's time to add some fuel. The cap right here says you can put up to 10% ethanol into this particular engine. I prefer not to use fuel with any ethanol at all. Also, I always make sure that I have a fuel stabilizer added to my fuel before I put it into any of my small engines. Now, I'm not going to fill this all the way. I'm just going to put enough in there to get it started and evaluate how well it's running. That ought to be plenty. There's a few other housekeeping things to do before we start it. The first is this little pin here needs to be removed from the start handle. Without this, you won't be able to start the engine at all. And that start pin needs to be inserted right here in order to start the engine. And speaking of that ignition key, in your bag with your manuals and things, there's a couple of other little pieces of hardware. One's an extra startup key, and then there's also these extra shear pins. Now these are used on the auger, and this is designed such that if the auger ever meets a whole bunch of extra resistance, those shear pins will shear off. And this is where you can have a couple of extras stored. Just pop them down where they belong there, and then put their cotter pins on, just like that. All right, we're ready to start this for the first time. There are two different ways to start this. The first is it's got an electric start here. You plug an extension cord in there and then just push this button to turn the engine over. The other is a pull cord here. So before you start it for the first time, you need to choke the engine, prime the bulb 3 times, and set the throttle to the run position. With that all set up, we're ready to start it for the first time. Now, there's a couple things to check as soon as you've started it for the first time. The first is to make sure that the transmission gears all work. You've got 2 reverse and 6 forward at varying speeds. Also make sure you can change the aim of the discharge chute easily with the handle. If anything is binding or kind of stuck, make some adjustments so that it moves freely. And then make sure that the auger control is working properly. Everything checked out, so now all I needed was some snow. And I had to wait a long time this winter. It's February already, and this is our first real snowstorm. And I've got to say, I'm pretty impressed with this snowblower. It is the least expensive 2-stage blower I could find, and it does a great job. The controls are pretty easy to use and fairly ergonomic. My hands didn't get fatigued with this like they did with my old snowblower, which was a really old John Deere. And having 6 forward gears is great because then you can dial in the speed just right so that you're not leaving any snow behind, but you're also not clogging up the chute. Now this was a really wet and heavy snow, and we got about 6 inches or so, and the snowblower never bogged down, never clogged up, never had any trouble, just cut right through it and threw it as far as I needed it to. I found that the discharge chute, I'd be able to get it set so I could shoot it really high and far, or I could get it to aim fairly low so it wouldn't go, say, over my neighbor's fence, for example. So overall, I'm pretty happy with this snowblower, and I hope this video has been helpful to you if you've got the same model. Now, I do have one complaint about this snowblower, and that is it doesn't have any lights installed on it. And there's no way to add those because the engine doesn't have the right kind of magneto or generator on it. Now, you may wonder why a snowblower even needs a headlight, but if you've ever had to do any snowblowing in the dark, you know why you need a headlight on one of these things. Now I've seen lots of other tutorials and videos where folks have added extra lights to a snowblower, but it's always a snowblower that came with a headlight from the factory in the first place, so it had a built-in electrical system capable of running some lights. This one does not. It doesn't have the right kind of magneto or generator in the engine. So if you're interested in seeing how I add some headlights to a snowblower that was never designed to have them in the first place, hit that subscribe button so that you can see it in one of my upcoming videos. And that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for watching, and have a great day.